For the longest time there was this story about the Nile River. It's a simple story really. It goes like this. The Nile belongs to Egypt, period. Full stop. It was a belief so strong you could almost see it carved into the pyramids themselves. This wasn't just some national pride thing either. It was backed up by paper. Old, dusty paper from a time when European guys in pith helmets were drawing lines on maps of Africa, creating countries where none existed and dividing resources they didn't own. These colonial-era treaties, signed in 1929, signed in 1959, basically gave Egypt a golden ticket to the Nile's waters, along with a veto power over any project upstream. Over 85% of the Nile's water, the very lifeblood of this massive river, actually comes from one place, Ethiopia. Imagine that. You have a giant water cooler in your house, you fill it up every single day, but your neighbor down the street has a contract from 100 years ago saying they get to drink almost all of it. And not only that, they can tell you that you're not allowed to install a new tap in your own kitchen. For decades, this was Ethiopia's reality. A nation blessed with immense water resources was stuck, unable to use its own river to power its homes or feed its people, all because of a colonial handshake from a bygone era. Ethiopia, however, started looking at these old papers and thinking, wait a minute, the country was never a party to these agreements. It was like being forced to pay for a dinner you never attended, let alone ordered. So, Ethiopia politely and then not so politely began to push back. They argued that a river that flows through 11 different countries can't possibly belong to just one. It's a shared resource, a lifeline for millions of people, not just in Cairo but in Addis Ababa too. This simple, logical idea was seen as radical. It was a direct challenge to a century of established order, and it set the stage for a showdown over the world's longest river. The core of the issue was a fundamental clash of perspectives. For Egypt, it was a matter of historical right and national security, a belief that any change to the river's flow was an existential threat. For Ethiopia, it was a matter of justice, development, and sovereignty. It was about the right to use a natural resource that originates within its own borders to lift its people out of poverty. Ethiopia was no longer willing to be the silent source of the Nile. It wanted a voice, it wanted a seat at the table, and if it couldn't get one, it was prepared to build its own table, right in the middle of the river. So, Ethiopia decided it was time to change the story. On April 2, 2011, the government made a stunning announcement. They weren't just going to ask for permission to use the Nile anymore. They were going to build a dam, a mega dam, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. The name itself was a statement. It wasn't just about electricity, it was about a national rebirth. This project was Ethiopia's moonshot. The plan was audacious. Build one of Africa's largest hydroelectric plants right on the Blue Nile. The news did not go over well in Cairo. Egypt went from concerned to furious, fast. Egyptian politicians went on television and openly discussed diplomatic sabotage and military strikes. The threats were barely veiled. You will not build this dam. Egypt used its international influence to block the project. They lobbied the World Bank and the IMF. They painted Ethiopia as a rogue state. The pressure wasn't just diplomatic. There were whispers of Egypt supporting rebel groups in Ethiopia and in neighboring countries. It was a high-stakes geopolitical chess game. Every Ethiopian move was met with a threat, a warning, or a political blockade. The international community stayed largely on the sidelines. But Ethiopia had a different plan. They weren't backing down. Construction equipment started rolling. The plan moved forward, rock by rock, concrete block by concrete block. The Ethiopian government announced the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam would be funded entirely by Ethiopians. No World Bank, no IMF, no foreign grants, just the people. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a test of national will unlike any other. The response was overwhelming. The project transformed from a government initiative into a national movement. Civil servants pledged a month's salary, business owners made huge donations, school children saved their lunch money to contribute, the government issued GERD bonds, people from all walks of life lined up to buy them, investing their personal savings into the concrete and steel rising on the Nile. It became a matter of patriotic duty. Owning a GERD bond was more than a financial investment. It was a certificate of belief in the country's future. It was a piece of the dream. This incredible wave of support wasn't limited to those living in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian diaspora mobilized in an unprecedented way. And so, against all odds, they did it. The threats didn't work. The political blockades failed. The financial squeeze backfired, sparking a wave of national unity instead of collapse. Slowly but surely, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam rose from the Guba Valley, a towering testament to a nation's resolve. The first filling began in 2020, the second filling, the third filling. Each milestone was celebrated across the country like a national holiday. In August 2022, the turbines whirred to life, sending electricity into the national grid. Lights turned on in homes that had never had power before. A promise made a decade earlier was finally being fulfilled. The GERD is more than engineering. It is a psychological victory. It shattered the old narrative that African nations are too poor, too divided, or too weak to execute grand visions without foreign supervision. Ethiopia proved self-reliance is a viable path to development.